Good morning. Today is Sunday, May 21st, 2023. There's a widespread practice to stay up all night learning Torah on the first night of Shavuot. It is my favorite night of the year in Montreal, hosted by Kollel Torah Mitzion at Hebrew Academy. This Thursday night, they will be learning from about midnight until Shachris, the morning service, at the earliest possible moment, which is at 4:20 a.m. And during that time, there will be a wide range of classes, teachers, subjects being taught. I will be teaching a class at 12:15 a.m. Hundreds of men and women, young and old, studying Torah all night, and then davening together with enthusiasm and passion. The trick to being able to do that is, number one, to take a nap on Thursday afternoon, and number two, about halfway through the learning, to have a cup of coffee and some cheesecake. I think that's what works for me. There is nothing like it. And I ask you to consider joining this year, even if only for a short time. You will never forget it. The earliest basis for this practice is a comment of our rabbis in the Midrash. In the Torah's narrative describing, leading up to, God revealing himself at Mount Sinai and speaking the Aseret Dibros, the 10 Commandments, to the Jewish people, we have the following verses. Vayihi bayom hashlishi, and it was on the third day. Remember, on Thursday night we discussed God had told Moshe to prepare the first day, the second day, and then the third day was going to be the revelation. And it was on the third day, biyos haboker, in the early in the morning, v'hayu kolos uvrakim v'anon kaveir al har. There was thunder and lightning and a thick cloud on top of the mountain, Mount Sinai. V'kol shofar chazak ma'od. And there was a loud sound to the shofar that was being sounded. The next pasuk says, Vayotze Moshe es ha'am likrasu elakim en hamachane. Moshe led the people from the camp to greet God around Mount Sinai. Now, those verses appear to be out of order because it sounds like from the first verse, Vayihi bayom hashlishi, there's thunder and there's lightning. That sounds like the event was about to start. But it's only in the next verse where we see Moshe as bringing the people. Wouldn't you have assumed Moshe would bring the people before it starts? So our rabbis in the Midrash say something that is extraordinary, and it's very difficult to understand. I do not pretend to be able to understand how it is that this has happened, but this is what our rabbis say. Our rabbis say that morning, the Jewish people slept late. And it turned out that God was ready at the top of Mount Sinai to start speaking the Aseret Dibros before the Jewish people actually got there. And it was considered, it was not the right thing. And from there, our rabbis say, the practice was in subsequent years that we would stay up all night studying Torah so that we would be ready at the crack of dawn to be able to relive the experience, to make up for the fact that our ancestors slept late that morning. How is it possible that the Jewish people slept late that morning? I can't understand it. How is it possible that every single Jewish person slept late? Nobody could wake up the people. I'm not able to explain that part. But what this indicates to us is that the practice that we have of staying up all night to study Torah is intended to be a tikkun, to fix that original incident, negative aspect to the incident. And our staying up is really a preparation for the Torah reading on the first morning of Shavuos that we want to do at the earliest possible moment. So to get to the Torah reading, you have to have the first part of davening first. And in Montreal, the first moment to be able to start the davening is at 4:20 a.m. this Friday morning. So we're doing all this learning and staying up so that we are fixing, so to speak, the problem of the original generation of having slept late. Okay, that's the earliest source of this practice. This practice became much more widespread and received much more attention after the following story was publicized, a story that happened in the mid-1500s. In the mid-1500s in Tzfat, the town in the northern part of Israel, there was a golden era. There were a collection of scholars, some of the greatest scholars over the last 2,000 years in different areas of Jewish learning. You had, for example, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the greatest expert in Jewish law, who wrote Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. You had the Arizal, the greatest Kabbalistic scholar of the last 2,000 years. You had Rabbi Shlomo Alkevitz, one of the greatest poets of the Jewish people. He's the one who wrote the poem, the song, the prayer, L'cha Dodi, that we sing on Friday nights. And they all had students, and they all lived within a short distance from each other and prayed in synagogues a short distance from each other. So the story I'm going to tell you was told by Rav Shlomo Alkevitz, and it was written down in a work called Shalah, Shnei Luchos Abris, that was written by Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz a short amount of time after the event it describes took place. Rav Shlomo Alkevitz tells the story that one year, on Shavuos, he and Rabbi Yosef Karo and their students, we decided that we were going to remain awake all night, the first night of Shavuos, and we were not going to waste a single second. We were going to be learning Torah without stop the entire night. And this is what we did. And he records the order, the different subjects that they studied. They studied from the Torah, they studied from Psalms, they studied from the Talmud. Okay. In the middle of the night, we heard a loud voice. And even the neighbors heard this, but they did not understand what was being said. And the sweet sound of this mysterious voice grew louder, and we fell on our faces. It was clearly not coming from a human source. And no one among us had the courage to look up to see from where this voice came. And the voice began to speak and said, "Listen, my loved ones. Peace be to you. May you be happy, may your descendants be happy, both in this world and the world to come. For you have endeavored to crown me," referring to God, "on this night. And you have returned the crown to its rightful place. Be strong, my beloved ones. Rejoice and know that you are the elite, and you have merited being privy to the palace of the king. And the sound of your Torah learning has ascended in front of the Almighty, and even the angels have been silenced. And all the celestial beings, along with the King of Kings, are listening to the utterances of your mouths. And I, an angelic representative of the Almighty, have been sent to speak to you, to compliment you and encourage you. May you and your descendants be blessed for ignoring the demands of sleep, not like those others who are slumbering at this holy time. And don't stop learning Torah for even a second, because the thread of God's grace surrounds you, and your Torah learning is dear to the Almighty. And Rav Alkevitz says, and when we heard this, we all stood up and declared in a loud and trembling voice, "Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Leolam Va'ed." They understood that they had received a message from heaven, a message from God. Heaven had parted, and there was this divine message responding to what they had done. That's the spiritual potential of learning Torah all through this special night. And that is what we try to recreate ourselves when we stay up on Shavuos night learning Torah. So I want to tell you my story. It's not as dramatic as what happened in Tzfat, but it transformed my life. Shavuos has a very personal meaning to me from the time that I was 14 years old. So when I was 14 years old, I was beginning high school in the United States. I went away to yeshiva. I was from what would be the equivalent of a classic ADATH family. And I was completely unprepared for a traditional yeshiva of higher learning. I went to Ner Yisrael, Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael in Baltimore. I left home. And to put it mildly, I did not fit in very well. No one in my family had ever attended a yeshiva, going back as many generations as anyone knew about. My background in Jewish learning was very weak, and I was not a very good student. Here we are 50 years later, and I cringe at so many of the memories from that first year. I cringe when I remember what I wore on my first Shabbos in yeshiva. I knew I had to wear a jacket and tie for Shabbos. I knew that I had to wear a hat. My hat was a tan straw hat. Everyone else in the yeshiva, hundreds of others, they all had black hats. I remember on that first Shabbos, my outfit was a pair of maroon slacks and a plaid jacket and tie. I really did not fit in. For me especially, it was a very long trip from Memphis to Baltimore. All that year, I struggled. I struggled to understand the Talmud classes, which were really above my ability. I worked hard, but without much success. My Hebrew was very weak. At that time, there was nothing available in translation. We had volumes of the Talmud, Hebrew, Aramaic, that's it. And you had to follow what the teacher was saying in class to be able to understand it. Most of the other boys were able to understand most of it themselves because of where their backgrounds. I couldn't understand a thing. And I was frustrated. I was frustrated that I had to look up virtually every single word in a Hebrew dictionary. There's a classic dictionary of Aramaic to English called Jastrow. Dr. Marcus Jastrow wrote this, compiled this dictionary, and it was just my constant companion. I'm reading a line, and every other word I've got to look it up because I didn't know what it meant. And that year was especially difficult because it was a Jewish leap year. So that means that the time between Sukkot and Pesach, the longest stretch, was 1 month longer. The school year was 1 month longer than any other year. It was not going well. And near the end of that year, my first year there, Shavuos finally came. On the first night of Shavuos, all of the boys went into the dining hall for the Yom Tov meal. And after we finished the Yom Tov meal, we came back into the Beis Midrash, the study hall. It was around midnight. And from midnight till about 5 a.m., the Beis Midrash, the study hall, was full. Hundreds of students of every age were there. Every seat was taken. And it was incredible, the intensity that did not let up. Young boys, men, were studying Torah, and there was no wandering around, there was no gossiping, there was no schmoozing in the hall. Everyone was studying with complete concentration and intensity straight, and there were no classes. Everyone was either studying by themselves or with a chavrusa, with a study partner. And something happened to me. Something opened up for me. I was able, for the first time in my life, to learn Torah with an intensity and a satisfaction that I had never known before. It started to make sense. I remember I spent a large part of that night studying a sefer, a set of Hebrew books that I had just bought. It was the first sefer, the first book that I had bought, and it's called Ma'ino Shel Torah. I still use it. It's a collection of short commentaries on each Torah portion, and I want to be very honest. The reason that I purchased this set is because it was written in very, very easy Hebrew. I felt I had the best chance, still with my Jastro every other word, to be able to at least get the Hebrew, even if I didn't understand the concepts, but at least I could try to understand the words. And so I'm sitting with my book, my sefer, and I have my Jastro open, every other word, and for the first time in my life, I was learning Torah. I was understanding it, and it felt good. And from that night, I was a different person. And my life started a new trajectory, leading me to this moment with you. I don't think you and I would be here at this moment had I not had that experience 50 years ago on Shavuot night. And whatever success or ability in Torah learning I have had over the past 50 years, I trace it back to that Shavuot night. So I shared with you the amazing, incredible story told by the Shalah of Rav Shlomo Alkevitz, Rav Yosef Karo, the angel speaking to them at the middle of the night in Tzfat. The heavens opened up. I think that that story is so important, and the practice based on it is so important to me because, in a sense, it happened to me. And I hope, if you give it a chance, it might happen for you. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.